Hello students. Today we're going to look at factoring polynomials or trinomials in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. There are three things that you need to know. First of all, the first thing you need to remember is if the leading coefficient is negative, then factor out -1. If my leading coefficient is negative, I have to factor out that -1 in order to be able to factor the trinomial. The second thing to know, if there is a greatest common factor, factor out the GCF first. If I have a greatest common factor between all of the terms that are in my trinomial or my polynomial, I have to factor out that greatest common factor first. Then I can factor the trinomial into two binomials. Now I'm going to go over these and we're going to do sample problems for each of them in just a second, but I wanted you to have all these three things down. Number 3, guess and check. I don't recommend you staring at the problem until the answer comes to you in a dream. I recommend that you plug in numbers and you guess and you check until you find the right solution. So now that you know all three of these, let's do some examples together. The first example we'll do together is negative p squared plus 8p minus 12. Well, my leading coefficient is negative, so I have to factor out that negative first. And I don't have a greatest common factor, so I'm just going to factor out the -1. So I factor out the negative, and if it helps you to put a -1 instead of just a negative, that's fine with me. So negative p squared divided by -1 is just p squared. 8p divided by -1 is negative 8p. And negative 12 divided by -1 is positive 12. So I just divided everything in the original trinomial by -1 to get this trinomial, and now I can factor it. Well, thankfully, I know it's just p and p because a is 1, so we're good there. So give me two factors of 12 that add up to -8. Well, I know those factors have to be both negative because b is negative, so give me two factors that add up. That would be -6 and -2, because -6 times -2 is positive 12, -6 plus -2 is -8. So my solution is -1. I have to bring that -1 down or the answer will be wrong. -1 times the quantity of p minus 6, p minus 2, that's all. I'm done. I don't need to multiply that -1 by anything. That is my final answer. Now let's just say, for instance, that I had an equal 0 on all of this, because you're going to get to those as well. Let's say I had an equal 0. Well, what would I do? Well, I know -1 does not equal 0, so I don't even mess with that. I just leave the -1 right here. But p minus 6 equals 0, or p minus 2 equals 0, so p equals 6 or 2. So if I had to solve the equation, now I'm not saying that you need to add an equal 0 to all of the problems that don't have it. No, don't add an equal 0 if there's not one. But if there happens to be one, then ignore the -1 here and just tell me what p equals, and those would be your two solutions. So here's my next example, -2x squared plus 2x plus 4. So if I notice each of my terms and I see that there's a greatest common factor in there, and the greatest common factor happens to be 2. Well, I also notice that my leading coefficient is negative. So what I'm going to do is combine those two, the negative and the 2, and I'm going to factor out the -2 first. So I'm going to factor out -2, and -2x squared divided by -2 is positive x squared. 2x divided by -2 is negative x, and 4 divided by -2 is -2. So I have now my binomial of x squared minus x minus 2. Again, I bring down the negative 2 and I factor this polynomial. X squared minus x minus 2. Well, I know it's going to be x and x. And I've got to come up with two factors of negative 2 that add up to negative 1. Well, the only two factors of negative 2 are negative 2 and 1, or negative 1 and 2. I know I'm going to get a negative, so the 2 is going to have to be negative. Negative 2 times positive 1 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. So my two binomials are x minus 2 and x plus 1. Now, let's just say, for example, that we have an equals 0. Once again, I'm not going to do anything with this negative 2. Okay? It stays here. It doesn't get erased, but I'm not doing anything with it when I have an equation to solve. So I have x minus 2 equals 0, or x plus 1 equals 0. So x equals 2 or negative 1. Again, if I don't have an equal 0, don't put one. I'm just killing two birds with one stone by showing you how to factor the trinomial, and then what happens if it's an equation. This is what I would do. So here's my next example. Negative 2x squared minus 17x plus 30. Well, I've got a negative leading coefficient, so I need to factor that out. So negative 1, 2x squared plus 17x minus 30. Now I have a trinomial and I can factor it. Well, notice that a is 2, so my factors of 2 are 2 and 1. So 2x and x. Either one works. Now I have to come up with two factors of negative 30 that plug in here. Now there are a lot of factors of negative 30. I have negative 1 and 30, 1 and negative 30. I shouldn't put a comma because I'm going to put something else there. And then I have 3 and negative 10, or negative 3 and 10. And I have 5 and 6, 5 and negative 6, or negative 5 and 6. So now I know the factors of negative 30, so I'm just going to start plugging them in and see if they work. Staring at it isn't going to help me a bit. Let's just plug in and see. Negative 1 and 30. 2 times 30 is 60. That's way off. There's no way that's going to work. So let's try negative 30 and 1. Well, negative 30x plus 2 isn't 17, so we know we can cross those off. What about 3 and negative 10? Plus 3 minus 10. Well, 2x times negative 10 is negative 20. Negative 20 plus 3 is negative 17. Ooh, that's negative 17. How can I make that positive? What if I just did this? I did minus 3 and plus 10. 2 times 10 is positive 20, plus negative 3 is positive 17, and negative 3 times 10 is negative 30, so there are my factors. 2x minus 3 and x plus 10. Again, guessing and checking, plugging in those numbers, working it out, looking for OI being outsides times insides to equal b, outsides positive 20, insides negative 3, positive 20, negative 3 is positive 17, so OI would be 17. I'm going to say that a lot so that you might get used to that. There are my factors. I'm done. Again, I don't do anything with that negative 1. It stays there. The last example is 6x squared plus 45x minus 24. Well, 6, 45, and 24 has a greatest common factor, and that greatest common factor is 3. So I'm going to factor out the 3. I don't want to factor out negative 3. I don't know why I put that. Should not have put the negative. I'm just factoring out 3. So 6x squared divided by 3 is 2x squared. 45x divided by 3 is plus 15x. And negative 24 divided by 3 is negative 8. And there is my trinomial. So now I'm going to factor this out. I bring the 3 down. It's not going anywhere. And so I have 2x and x, because there are only two factors of 2. That would be 2 and 1. And now what are my factors of negative 8? Negative 1 and 8, 1 and negative 8, -2 and 4, or 2 and -4. Guessing and checking. That's all I'm doing. So let's start with -1 and 8. -1, 8. 2 times 8 is 16. -1 times x is -1. 16 plus -1 is 15. Dang, got it on the first try. So 2x minus 1, x plus 8. -1 times 8 is -8. 16x, -1x, positive 15x. I'm done. Write those factors down, guess and check, and you'll have it. Now, I'm not giving you any practice problems because your homework assignment is chapter 9.6 in the workbook, all of the odd numbers. So you'll probably already notice that all the problems I did were the even numbers, were some of the even numbers. So you're welcome to use those, but I need all of the odd numbers, 9.6, and we will check those in class tomorrow.